Good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts, and welcome back to the Underground Digital Tiki Bar. It's Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisitions and Alcohol. So cheers. All right. Well, tonight I wanted to get down to the basics and talk about what is Agile acquisitions. Of course, there's Agile development, which is taking the federal government world by storm. You're hearing that everywhere. But is Agile acquisition actually the same thing as Agile development? Absolutely not. Of course, the two go together. When you're doing Agile development, you want to have an Agile acquisition to support it. But an Agile acquisition can be appropriate for all kinds of acquisitions. Because really what we're talking about is being efficient, being effective, being flexible, and getting things done quickly. So when we're doing that, we want to take advantage of all of the capabilities that are provided for us in the federal acquisition regulations, as well as other acquisition authorities that are provided. Specifically, I thought I would talk about tonight simplified acquisition procedures, which I personally think are far too underused when we're talking about how we're going to get things done efficiently. We're so quick to look for, how can we sole source something? How can we circumvent competition? Sometimes that's the right thing to do when it makes sense and when there's an appropriate exception. But generally speaking, we can do acquisitions, we can have fair competition to the maximum extent practical, and the FAR provides that for us under simplified acquisition procedures. So if you actually look under FAR Part 13, feel free to go to myfar.io if you want to take a look at this. FAR Part 13 talks about the SAP procedures. Specifically, FAR 13.104 talks about the fact that while you should attempt to go out to the maximum extent you can, the maximum extent may be nothing more than identifying 3 vendors that can reasonably perform the work and would likely be interested in bidding on it. This can then avoid having to post something on the government point of entry and can get you narrowed down to a much more strategic population of vendors that can respond to your requirement. When you take that in conjunction with commercial acquisitions, or FAR 13.5, which is simplified acquisition procedures for commercial contracting, and as I've explained in some of my other videos, we're talking about Agile development. I believe that's a commercial service since we adopted this practice from industry. And so now we have a threshold of $7 million. Now I know when we talk about government procurement, $7 million is about as much as we pay for the program management of most of our acquisitions. But that's basically unnecessary. I mean, if you talk to any startup company, if they were given the opportunity for $7 million, the things they could have done with that right from the get-go would be absolutely amazing. And the government doesn't have to be any different. We just have to strip away all of the unnecessary reporting and requirements that industry is charging us for, and rightfully so. But that's what makes the prices so high. That's what makes all the steps and hoops we make them jump through is what makes the indirect rates for these traditional government contractors so high. They have to cover their costs. So we simplify the process. I've talked a few times about simplifying that process through a down select approach. I think this is a great way to be nimble, to be efficient, to give industry, I believe industry should only have to put in as much work, and the government should only have to put in as much work as commensurate with the likelihood of success. So with a down select process, whether it's a white paper or I'm starting to use forms, so pre-scripted forms where all the answers will come back in the same format. So that way, when there is competition, when there's several vendors being considered, and the likelihood of winning is up in the air, the vendor input is minimized, and the reviewers work to determine whether a vendor is capable based on some very clear criteria. That's limited as well. As you start narrowing that pool and you're getting more and more serious with the vendors that remain in the population, then it's time to start deepening the engagement and involvement with these vendors to see who is truly the best fit. And remember, that's FAR 13 that covers all sorts of acquisitions, but you have FAR 16.5 also specifically talks about IDIQs and simplifying acquisitions as well. So in that same sense, when you're going under an IDIQ, yeah, of course you have to give fair opportunity to all the vendors on a particular award, but you should be streamlining that acquisition. So Agile acquisition, at the end of the day, as I said, is really just a matter of making things efficient. It's lean. It's taking out the parts of the process that don't add value and maximizing the parts that do. So there you go. That's Agile acquisitions. Hopefully I've given you a couple strategies that you can use, you can try out, or you can recommend if you're on the industry side. If you're seeing RFPs or if agencies are coming to you and asking how best they might get to your services or supplies, these are recommendations that you should consider bringing to them in addition to the other ones that I've mentioned in the past. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. As always, subscribe to these videos. If you keep watching them, I'll keep making them. I really appreciate all the feedback and encouragement that I've gotten. It's kind of cool every time I go to meetings or go to events, people are like, oh, I've seen your video. So if you're watching them, let me know. Leave me a comment or subscribe so I know that they're actually getting the usefulness out of it that I'm hoping you are. So with that, you all have a great weekend, and I'll catch you next week. Cheers.